My name is David Daniel Ball, and these are the headlines for Thursday, the 19th of March, 2009. $300 million Alcopops tax must now be returned to distillers, says Gillard, who didn't plan for the eventuality that her legislation would fail. 2 houses targeted in drive-by shootings in Sydney's west. Fritzl admits murder enslavement charges. Woman gives birth on plane, leaves baby behind. Astrobat hitches ride on Space Shuttle Discovery. Apparently it happened in 96 and 98 too. One wonders why it is that such creatures seek the heavens during Democrat presidencies. Rudd's $900 cash bonus is in jeopardy as somebody takes it to the High Court. AIG boss asks bonus recipients to return half the cash. And don't send tax cash to distillers, says the opposition. And in comments, when men of honour speak, the nation must listen by Piers Akerman. Col Dillon is a man of impeccable reputation. A former Queensland police inspector, a whistleblower to the Fitzgerald inquiry, which exposed corruption at the highest levels of the Queensland police force. He won respect for the brave stand he took against entrenched crime. He is beyond reproach. Well, Piers, we await what the polls suggest will be a close election. The unfairness of that thought outrages me. I do not believe that Queensland should reward incompetent governments with more time, but I recognise it may. Another issue that is related and not about me I would like to bring to your attention. The 5T Vietnamese gang was disbanded after the leader's death. The public do not know how or why, but they have a right to know and a need to know about something that happened 15 years ago. As a school teacher in that neighborhood following the disbandment, I'm privy to some facts. I recall one year 7 student who was a little miserable because he felt he was a 5T gang member and that his life would follow in a fatalistic direction and that nothing mattered. He didn't know that the 5T gang had been disbanded some time ago, and he didn't know why. It wasn't my fault, but he grew up to leave the school a fine young man and not a gang member. The Cabramatta community is part of Western Sydney Bible Belt, with many Christian churches working with some people who are desperate and in need. One such church converted one of the high-ranking members of the gang, maybe a few, so that when the leader died, the gang leadership approached the police and suggested that they disband them while they still had a chance, as they were a snake without a head, and not to wait until it grew back. The 5T gang, apparently contracted to kill Newman and many others, was wound up because its leaders found faith in God. The public need to know that. Without that public knowledge of something so important, we are lost. Thank you, Piers, for the reminder that when men of honour speak, the nation must listen. The Day the Laughter Died by Tim Blair. Comedic sadness continues. The traditionally left-wing world of comedy has plunged into depression with the departure of its favourite conservative targets, former US President George Bush and former Prime Minister John Howard. Israel blamed for everything, as usual, from Tim Blair. Academic Nick Dyrenforth, with whom I previously disagreed, writes an excellent column for The Australian. As impressionable, well-meaning first-year students begin their university studies, they are actively preyed upon by the socialist jihadists of the far left. Most of the young socialist alternative recruits will disappear within a matter of months. Hopefully their departure will be prompted much by a rejection of the group's imbecilic economic theories as these abhorrent, irresponsible attacks on Israel and the Jewish people. In the meantime, we can look forward to the next offering by the socialist alternative peaceniks. My tip? Global warming. Why Israel is to blame. Uneasy lies the head that wears this hat. Pope Benedict XVI chats with Cameroon's President Paul Biya. The building in the background is actually a hat below which Biya's wife Chantal is slowly having her spine compressed. Plus, a large yellow orb in the sky burned me somehow. It's not that the British are whiners necessarily, but they do tend towards inventive when it comes to holiday complaints. Violence programs have been developed. Suzanne Voke-Sizemore, Executive Director of the Erie County Council on the Status of Women, reflects on events following the decapitation of Asiya Hassan. Bye Bly? Maybe not. Still, it looks like we're in for a fun time on Saturday night. Queensland is poised to witness its tightest election race in 14 years. But sift through the opinion polls and other evidence and there can only be one conclusion: a history-making win for the ALP by the narrowest of margins. St. Teleprompter Day? Heard the one about the President, an Irishman and a teleprompter? Irish Prime Minister Brian Cowen was just a few paragraphs into an address at St. Patrick's Day celebration at the White House when he realized something sounded way too familiar. Turns out he was repeating the speech President Barack Obama had just given. And an update. Comments Mark Stein, is the teleprompter really the brains of the operations? And if so, why hasn't it nominated a new Deputy Treasury Secretary? And from Maureen Dowd, Barack Obama even needs a teleprompter to get mad. From Andrew Bolt, embassies too small to be safe. Greg Sheridan finds a nugget of concern deep within a report of our diplomatic service by the depressingly Me Too Lowy Institute. No secret hearings, please. This initial closed-door and unrecorded community consultations being held by the Royal Commission into Black Saturday Fire seems too secret to be safe. If only the Pacific Brands boss played golf. Labour says the $1.9 million pay of Pacific Brands chief Sue Morfitt is disgusting, disgraceful, greedy and obscene, and the Rudd government threatens to take back taxpayer money. But show a Labour sports star and suddenly no pay is too high for taxpayers to chip in yet more. Tiger Woods is coming to Melbourne in a $3 million deal, with Victorian taxpayers chipping in for half the bill. The world's #1 golfer will play in Australian Masters at Kingston Heath in November. Money gone. But look on the bright side, at least we got our pink bats, public housing and free cash before the money ran out. Answer, colder than they thought. February the 13th, global warming believers leave Britain for an Arctic expedition. Team of 3 will be measuring the thickness of ice in the most accurate way yet and will carry out a survey of the floating ice in the Arctic Ocean. The data they gather will give scientists a better idea of how long the ice cap could survive. February the 19th, global warming believers note a strange omen. With unusually heavy snowfall in Britain just before we left Canada, leave taking from our families was not quite what we had planned. March the 18th, global warming believers request help. Project director and ICE team leader Penn Haddow and his colleagues Martin Hartley and Ann Daniels are now down to half rations and fighting to survive in brutal sub-zero weather conditions. Hot research protected. Professor Wei-Chiung Wang of New York State University at Albany is a hero to warming alarmists, having produced widely cited papers that dismissed objections that some of the recent rise in land temperatures was caused by growing urbanization around the measuring stations. Mathematician Douglas Keenan checked Wang's work and have claimed fraud. And from Father Jonathan Morris, media distorts Pope's position on condoms in Africa. Today, Pope Benedict XVI began a 5-day pastoral trip to Africa, where the Catholic Church is growing in leaps and bounds, even while its members and charitable institutions face enormous social challenges. Statistics of church attendance, baptisms, and other sacraments in priestly and religious vocations show faster growth for the Catholic Church in Africa than in any other part of the world. This growth is paralleled, however, with a local reality of tribal warfare, government corruption, poverty, and disease in large swathes of the continent. Dorothy Quens, an HIV activist in neighboring Kenya, was recently quoted saying, "Abstinence education remains the best strategy, especially for the risk group aged 15 to 25 years. The concept has worked well for Uganda and can work for other African countries." All of this and what's making the news? Pope says no to condoms. Thanks to the Associated Press's reporting, you will see this headline or a similar one on every major American news site as a first report of what this trip is all about. As a report, I consider it shallow at best. Aboard the Alitalia plane headed to Yaoundé, Cameroon, the Pope responded to a reporter's question about the AIDS epidemic and the Church's refusal to promote condom distribution as the solution. Pope Benedict XVI said you can't resolve it with distribution of condoms. On the contrary, it increases the problem. For the record, and unfortunately among the major news sites you'll see only this distinction made here on Fox News, the Pope's statement was specifically a judgment against condom distribution as a solution to the HIV epidemic. He did not say condoms don't work in preventing the transmission of HIV virus. He did not say the Church would prefer that an HIV-positive patient infect a sexual partner than that he or she use a condom. He did not say it's a double sin to use a condom in non-marital sex. Pope Benedict knows history is proving the mass distribution of condoms by the United Nations and population control organizations such as the Principal Strategy Against AIDS has failed miserably.